Hey, everyone. Happy Monday to you. You know, we've got a little bit of AI, got a lot of security. It is Black Hat, or as some of us in the industry say, it's summer camp in Vegas in the desert this week. So we'll go heavy on security. We've got a lot to go over with you. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. So as I mentioned in the opening, happy Monday. It is Black Hat Week, summer camp in the desert for our cybersecurity friends. Techstrong will be out there in force along with our friends at Futurum Group. And we have a lot going on. We'll be streaming live from there. We'll be doing a Techstrong Gang from Las Vegas on Thursday, the last day of Black Hat, right before DEF CON starts. But that's further this week. Let's talk about today, Monday morning, rise and shine. Got a lot to go over with you. A lot of security, some AI we want to talk about. But let's first introduce our gang members. We got a full boat of gang today. First of all, we'll go west to east again. We're going to start out west with our Silicon Valley-based editor extraordinaire, John Swartz. John, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be with all of you.
Absolutely. Hope you had a great weekend and ready to rock here this busy week. John, you'll be out at Black Hat this week.
I will be with you and Mitch and the cast of thousands. Yes.
Very good. Looking forward to seeing you. I guess next is New Mexico, east or west of Colorado. They're kind of about even, aren't they? Just straight up.
Pretty even. I think we're pretty even.
Well, I'm going to go with you first, Tracy, because we like you better. Only kidding.
Goodbye.
but she, a regular gang member here, always willing to help out and pitch in. Well, part of the Techstrong family. She's also the CEO of Deploy Hub and Open Source Linux Foundation, board member extraordinaire, Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, welcome.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's always great to be on these because it really keeps me frosty. I have to do a lot of reading and a lot of research, so it's fun.
All right. It keeps you going. Moving from Tracy, just up north and actually going up in altitude as well. It's our CTO and Futurum CTA, and we do love him. All kidding aside, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, welcome.
I'm feeling the love this morning. It's security week, and, here we are in Techstrong Gang, so.
Absolutely. Excellent. Moving from there, though, deep into Alabama. It's our AI, DevOps, cloud, author, personality, Bachagaloop, John Willis. John, I haven't done one of these with you now in a couple of weeks. I'm always out when you're on. So it's great to have you on here with me.
Hey, Alan, it's great. I agree with Tracy. It's just fun because, you got to dig in and do a bunch of research, and it's like, oh, I didn't know that. So, so it's pretty cool doing this. So.
We enjoy having all of you on. And joining me here locally in our Boca Raton Techstrong headquarters studios, it's our Chief Content Officer celebrating a birthday this week. So let's give him a big shout out for that. He's 21 plus again. Our own Mike Vizard.
There you go, man. There's a portrait in my basement that's getting older instead of me.
Yeah, it's just kind of voodoo. Put it on that. Well, it's great to have you here, Mike. All right, let's jump into stuff. Our first kind of topic block today is the rise of open source AI. I have some thoughts on this, but Mike, why don't you kick it?
Well, let's jump in a little bit because early on, everybody said these proprietary platforms were so far ahead that no one could catch up. And then recently, it looks like, Google's been showing some interesting stuff. Apple's been showing some stuff. There's Meta and Mistral, and there's all kinds of open source models out there that are rather robust. And it looks like the open source community is catching up pretty quickly. John, I know you've been researching this stuff, and I do mean John Willis. What's your impression of what's going on here?
Yeah, no, it's I think we've had this conversation. I think, like most people who are sort of afraid of the sort of the large proprietary models, are rooting for this open source. And I think it's been debatable. But like we've had these discussions, can it catch up? And I'm I've been optimistic all along, but I think recently, especially Apple's recent announcement, some of the stuff that Google's doing and Meta, of course. But yeah, the Apple stuff is really good. The thing that's really interesting is there's sort of a fake open source thing out there. People talk about open source. It's a little bit different in sort of generative AI because there's really sort of three components. One is, what did you use to train the model? What are the weights that you use to train the model? And then the code. So you got to be sort of buyer beware when you see open source, because the code could be open, and even sort of the sources could be reasonably documented, but the weights were not relatively documented. And Apple, I think Apple has just come out across the board. The sources. In fact, the whole project they're creating is this data comp. For language models, sorry, and so that I think in some ways it might be the most extensive version of an open source. You do have the Google Gemma stuff, where they are producing the weights and the code, but I don't know they're so involved in this sort of other project that's going on that seems to be funded or a lot of research by Apple. So I think the Apple thing's really good. You got sort of Meta, the Llama 3.1 stuff. And, but one last thing is really interesting too. So if you look at their licenses, they also have these sort of weird licenses too. Like they're not like, our classic open source licenses, just sort of the Google, what do they call it? It's a Google specific, there's an Apple specific license. And even though they sort of read open, the devil's in the details. Like I was at Missile Defense, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And I was asking them, because there are a lot of these government controls are in this quandary of like, I can't really use, open models right now, or those sort of SaaS-based models like, GPT. And I said, well, what are you doing with Meta, like Meta 3.1? And they were like, yeah, it's not clear because some of these models have responsibility clauses. And some of them, I know I've been told by sort of DoD from Missile Defense that they have sort of no warfare or military use or like something like that. And it's not clear. It wasn't clear to the people who were implementing AI there that they could or were able to use that license. And I haven't, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into Google's license or Apple's license, but both of them have responsibility clauses.
Yeah. Well, they're not standard OSI licenses, right? Mitchell and I had a run-in with that about 15 years ago. Check your own license. The Google license is a little bit more accepted than others, but it's still not true OSI. And I think, John, you're onto something there. And for those organizations, like a government type of organization, that need clarity, liquid, clear clarity on licensing like that. If it's some one-off license, it's going to delay adoption there. But I think there's something else to look at here, though, guys. Open source as a business model. What some of these companies who've been making moves, Apple and Meta, look, they're not the market leaders, right? I would have to say market leaders probably, obviously OpenAI. Google has been doing a ton of stuff, maybe even Anthropic with Claude.
Google's conflicted because there's a proprietary model that they have, and then there's an open source one. So
yeah, but that's not conflicted. That's Google. They do that with everything. But the bottom line here is these guys are trying to get claw back market position by cloaking themselves in the open source banner. Mm-hmm. And as John points out, maybe not open source, but that's what they're doing. They're doing this strictly not for any kind of goodwill or benevolence. They're doing it to try to get back in because they're.
If you look at Apple, you could clearly see they talk all about the on-device model, right? Like, so that's, so they're saying, or from what I've read, right, which is, I don't know everything, but is that.
Sure, John?
yeah, those so many hours in a day, right? But hey, there's sort of a lot about the on-device. So you think about like, okay, where can they win, right? So you got the sort of the open AI on your device opportunities within the last, I don't know, 6 months or 4 months or 3 months, right? And run ChatGPT on your phone, so that like that's strategic product, right? Like how do you on your sort of, Mac, your iPhone, your iPad, all that. So I think there is something there. I think Meta, Mark Hinkle has a really good, when you get him on, he's a Techstrong Gang guy, good friend of all of ours, but he's, he thinks there's like a sort of like you think about Meta, like, how does Meta made their money all along? Like just figure out who all the people are interact with your technology and you'll make crazy money on it. So like, I think there's a play there. So I don't know, like you're right. It's not just benevolence, right? They're not just like, hey, we're going to be good guys. But it is that combination that, that sort of line between all vendors in open source have dealt with. So, even back in the DevOps stuff, the chef, the puppets, right? They create a lot of value with the hope of getting value back, right? Well,
so if I recall the Apple model they released, I think they even said it's probably not going to make it into product. It's really there for experimentation and learning, and so which is a different kind of catch-up strategy, right? You mentioned them being behind, where the open AIs and et cetera of the world are. So it, one of the biggest questions I have about open source models, and there's, Hugging Face has got a lot of stuff on it, is, this is security week. So I'll bring up the security. It's another attack vector for someone to, go in and change weights, train the model differently, whatever it might be. And so, I think if you're using a popular model off of Hugging Face, okay, maybe there's some, obscurity through lots of people using it, maybe not. But do you go to a trusted source like OpenAI or Apple or Google, whatever trust you put in them, to get models for things that you may not understand how it works, more or less, be able to build one yourself?
And let's not forget that they are working with the university system to build this model. So they're not doing it completely on their own. They are working with, college graduates and college, undergrads to build these models. And to Alan's point, I think we have to understand why they would do that. Well, the more that they can bring in young developers and build trust among that community, the better off they'll be for maybe a 13B model instead of a 7B model. So there is definitely, it's not all, coming from their heart. They're being smart about the market. They're understanding that this whole idea in the past of vendor lock-in on some of these tools is not something that enterprises even want to be caught in. And these are core pieces of software. So, yay, I'm glad because, a lot of times I hear that open source is going to the wayside because of security issues. But when we see something like this being brought forward as an open source offering, it tells me that open source is still strong and alive. And it is the way to really establish yourself in the market and to bring in young developers along the way. And that's part of the strategy, I'm sure.
John, can you clarify one point? So based on all the things you described with the licenses and the use cases, are they trying to contain the forking of these LLMs? I mean, it seems like one of the things that we like about open source is people will take things and build and expand upon it, but how constrained are these things?
No, they're not. I mean, that's the point. Once you open up the weights, I mean, Mitch made a good point. I was talking about on the last one, we talked about the research about, bytecodes in models, right? And what Wiz.ai are doing, like they're showing like how people are escaping out of inference engines, not even training, inference engines, getting into Kubernetes clusters, escaping out of those and actually getting on shared physical hosts on Amazon. I mean, this was Hugging Face. But yeah, I mean, if you read the Apple, particularly, I mean, when you start producing the weights, I mean, you are basically telling people, hey, you've got it all now. And I think, if I had to say, it's going to be something about, probably SBOMs. If if the industry gets, good. Like it, but it's not too different what we see, like all these new attack vectors, like Mitch brought out, right? Like, there are people doing sort of retraining or training weights that are creating, sort of nefarious results. But like, what was the guy who moved two blank spaces in a node app because she took 30 internet down, right? Like a few years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is the blessing and the beast of open source. We just have to get wiser. Just, like you think about all the dependencies, what in a large bank right now, it's scary. The code, like if you drill down to some libraries, I mean, it's like literally production code that is literally written by kids, and again, that's sort of like the S-bomb, a shout out to Josh Corman for really one of the originators of that, but, the executive order that drove it. And now it's sort of hopefully close to late fact. I know we're going to talk about that. You guys are going to talk about that later, but the point is, we've got to sort of learn from our mistakes, learn from how we did things in the past. And, and I think we're going to have to come up with a mechanism to identify models by some type of timestamp or some repository that says that these are the ones that are trusted. And, but right now, I think it's still the Wild West, right? People are just saying, here's the code, here's the weights, and here's the data. Have a party. In fact, they want it. Yeah, they're promoting that.
So. What could go wrong?
That is the point.
What could go wrong?
That is the point. Have a party.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Hey, we're going to take a break and then move into a couple of security segments here today. Before we do, though, I do want to give one shout out on the AI stuff. If you're watching the Olympics on Peacock, the Salesforce people have been running a bunch of ads for Einstein. I don't know if any of you have caught that. They're really funny ads. And like when the person uses the Einstein to do whatever they're doing, they get like an Einstein wig and mustache and everything. It's actually pretty good. I don't know. I think it put AI in a good light. But let's take a break. Let's come back. Speaking of good light, our friends at CrowdStrike are probably going to be running up some legal bills. All this and more. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
All right, and we're back, and as promised, we're talking about the law as one of those cases where night follows day. Lawyers are following lawsuits about this CrowdStrike Windows outage issue. That doesn't come as much as a surprise, but Delta is looking for, I think, 150 million or so, and you multiply that by the number of people affected, and suddenly this becomes a rather large potential number, and I'm assuming there'll be class action suits and all kinds of fun things, and shareholders are also now suing CrowdStrike. So the mayhem has ensued. John, what's your take on what's going on here? I mean, can CrowdStrike withstand these number of lawsuits? Are they actually liable? What are you hearing?
Well, Ed Bastian is probably one of the people you do not want to piss off in a situation like this. I mean, I interviewed him a couple of years ago. He was a keynote speaker at CES, and he was obsessed with the technology of Delta and the customer experience, as well as they were working with airports in their terms of deploying their technology. So they're likely to sue. As you mentioned, the CrowdStrike shareholders have sued. There's going to be a cascade of actions in all likelihood. I talked to Daniel Newman at Futurum Group about this. He thinks this is going to be a series of. In terms of CrowdStrike, they have about $3.7 billion in cash at the end of their last fiscal quarter, and about $750 million in revolving credit line and insurance policies designed to mitigate the impact of legal claims. But it's going to be a torrent, and their stock is paying the ultimate price. They've shaved like $25 billion in market value off of the company because of what happened with the outage. It's interesting in that CrowdStrike is the very victim of the interconnected digital system that we all write about. It benefited from it. It has a good reputation despite what happened, but it also has a number of dependent mega corporations who were knocked out. In the case of Delta, they were, I think they canceled more than 6,000 flights, maybe nearly 7,000, which, to put it in context, that's as many flights as they had in 2019. So over 5 days, they lost 6,500 flights. They had to manually reset 40,000 servers. They have a crew tracking system that was knocked offline, so they couldn't coordinate the pilots and the flight attendants to fly the fleets. This left 500,000 of their customers looking for their luggage and try to rebook flights. So expect the legal actions to continue, especially, this weird thing too, is Ed Bastian was embracing this digital transformation idea, right? Last several years, a number of companies did, and a lot of them bet on CrowdStrike in part to help them make that transformation. And now we're seeing the dark side versus the benefits. So it's going to be a rough patch for CrowdStrike for the next several months.
So look, Delta could track their flights on a whiteboard.
Yellow pad
or yellow pad, some sticky notes.
We talked about that.
The deal.
Right.
The CrowdStrike shareholders, I think their suit problematic, but they probably have policies that cover that. But as far as Delta and some of the other CrowdStrike customers suing, good luck. Read your EULA, right? I think absent gross negligence, and gross negligence is a very high bar to cover. Absent gross negligence, I don't think they can sue for this. They might be able to request an arbitration, but I don't think. I think if you are a customer of CrowdStrike, I think your EULA is going to forfeit your right to sue them. And if you're not a customer of CrowdStrike, you're a Delta customer whose flight got canceled, you don't have standing to sue CrowdStrike because you're not in what they call privity with them.
Well, the one, just a real quick point. I'm sorry to interrupt. The one thing that I think they have more of an issue with, rather than the lawsuits, just the customers. The fact
that's going to be another thing. But
they're going to scare away potential customers.
Absolutely. But you know what, John? We've learned this over and over again in cybersecurity. Customers have very short memories.
They'll come back, right? I know it's happened to me.
Give it 9 months to a year, and this is way, way back in the rearview mirror because there'll be 1,200 other breaches.
The short-term hit will be significant.
Yeah.
The publicly traded company, they're gonna have some revenue fall short.
I think it's the investors is the real pain. Losing 25 billion market cap is, in like a week or two, right? Like that's.
Hey, there's no guarantees in the stock market.
So who's suing them? These retirement funds,
right?
And so there's a whole
that's a different thing.
Where are they going to invest? Where's their trust going? In fact, there's what's interesting. Remember David Bowles, the Bush v. Gore guy?
Yes, that's a good point, John.
There's a Plymouth. Yeah. There's some big guns. It is this large retirement fund out of Texas that they claim there's 20. They have a percentage gain for about $20 billion worth of loss. So yeah, I think the whole the institutional investors or the sort of the retirement fund type, those large fund investors, I think that's where it's going to get ugly. But
it seems to me that you take your chances. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tracy.
I just want to bring up two points that we're not talking about. I'm not an attorney, and I was actually traveling with this.
You did stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to, what is Microsoft's, obligation in this situation? And what were they doing from a DevOps perspective that got that problem into production so quickly? So I think it speaks to two things that we really should be talking about as a broader community. Number one, should we be having a company like CrowdStrike have that kind of access into these production environments? And number two, agents are invasive, and it broadens not just an anomaly like apparently in this case, but it does broaden the attack surface. So do we really need to have these additional agents, even for security, running out there?
The EU says you do. The EU specifically a few years ago said that Microsoft had to open up the kernel to these products to make changes.
Microsoft in turn is blaming the EU in part for what happened.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting though, Tracy, is that what's really interesting to me is the way these companies are approaching it, meaning Microsoft and CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike's very transparent about it. Kurtz is apologizing. He's trying to be out there as much as possible. Microsoft is as quiet as a church mouse.
That's what I'm saying. Where's Microsoft?
I got $20 that says during discovery, somebody's going to find some emails that says, geez, we knew all about this and we were alerted to this and we didn't do anything about it because we've seen that play now, 3 or 4 times involving Microsoft?
Cover up the crime.
I think the liability here, Alan, is not that a bug was created and got into production. They have processes in place already to try to drive quality into the product and improve that. I think it's about the distribution of software. That's where the underbelly of this is they push the software out to massive amounts of customers very quickly without.
There's limitations of liability in the
No, I understand. I'm just saying if you're going to claim negligence, I think that's where you're going to have
gross
possibility. Now, is it gross? How does it compare to what everybody else does in the industry? There is no standard for this, so I don't know that it's going to be successful.
I'm not a lawyer, but like if I was David Bowles and I was suing, I'd be suing Delta because here's the thing, right? That was a kernel change. And there's no evidence. You know, like everybody talks about CrowdStrike and Microsoft's responsibility. What was Delta's responsibility? Because I will tell you, I've been inside that organization, and you would never put a vendor patch on a flight control software system of a plane that was in fleet. It would never happen. Never, ever, ever happen at Delta. But somehow in that organization, their IT doesn't think the same way they do in every other silo. And the fact that there was, you know, at least it's sort of a counterfactual from my part, but I'm pretty certain there was sort of this authority bias where because it was CrowdStrike, I mean, but imagine any other vendor giving a bank or an insurance company or a healthcare or hospital a patch that is in sort of an in-fleet core business application without testing it. You know, like
you're right.
Software.
Can you imagine what the Delta software developers were thinking? I am quite sure that a Delta software developer has no access to make a change at a component that is such a low level that could impact so much. So that authority bias is coming in.
We'd let this patch go through like this. It's the opposite, kind of thing. But let's look at that. Let me play conspiracy theory here, right? Delta was never known as an airline. No, I'm only kidding. It's a different conspiracy. But the conspiracy theory here is the CEO of Delta blowing smoke to obscure or to remove blame from themselves for what they didn't do here.
Speak loudly and divert from what really the issue
exactly
might be. Right. He's ultimately responsible for what happened. Sorry.
Right. Pay no attention to our screw up over here. Here's where you got to look.
That does protest too much.
Right.
I think there's plenty of blame to go around, and that's clearly been established. But I would say that as the evidence comes out, reckless disregard might trump what's ever in your ULA agreement.
That's a fighting word there. Go easy on that.
I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I really do.
Gross. I'm telling you, it doesn't rise to gross negligence.
I think we rename this the mayhem segment where the fight broke out.
Absolutely.
The crazy part is we had multiple levels. We had CrowdStrike themselves that should have caught this. Then we had Microsoft, and then we had the end user customers. But as John pointed out, there's some kind of authority bias that said, let it rip. And we can't do that. And there's not a single developer that works for Delta that's allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Why CrowdStrike is allowed to?
Be careful all those people writing eBiv.
Tracy, this is an important point too. Like I'm going to slam this in because I think it goes right with what Tracy's saying, which is the other part is that that some argue that this is emergent behavior and might not catch it with testing. Then pay them money to get a digital twin. You know what I mean? Build it. Do something like that literally allows you to emulate emergent behavior. If the penalty is, the kind of loss that they've had and the industry loss, so.
Absolutely.
It should have been Delta that was pushing that forward, right? It should never have been CrowdStrike that was pushing that forward.
I like Tracy's line. Let her rip is kind of the IT equivalent of hold my beer.
Yeah. Look, I'm gonna close this segment down. I want to close it though, bringing a full circle. This segment was about lawsuits, not just about the other stuff. And when you're talking with lawsuits, right, there's a big difference between the truth, justice, and what happens in a courtroom. So we're going to take a break. You're watching Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back and let's talk about how secure is our software really anyway. We'll be back in a moment.
All right, folks, we're back. And as mentioned, we are right in front of Black Hat, and all the cybersecurity people on the planet are headed to Vegas, or at least a significant portion of them. Yet there's a growing body of evidence, and the latest are reports from GitLab and another one from Ox Security that suggests that the software that we have out there is not nearly as secure as we hope. And this is a recurring theme that's going on out there. And we have established that maybe software is more secure today than it was 10 years ago, but that doesn't mean it's any level of comfort. So, Mitch, let me ask you straight up, what is the state of application security in your mind?
Well, I think here we're talking even supply chain security, right, including AppSec. Well, first of all, this is a FUD article. This is a FUD study. Yes, there's lots of bad things out there. It's like saying another data breach happened. Okay, big deal. People don't care. They move on, right? They don't pay attention to this. I think it's more when I see articles like this or studies like this, and I understand, GitLab had it commissioned. It's really, what are we doing to help people develop secure software or secure the supply chain, whether it's coming in from, Docker-based images or open source repositories and package managers, things like that. I think we have a lot to address in our supply chain security, but I don't think throwing around numbers like this study does helps us much. Okay, so what? What are you going to do about it? It doesn't point to any specific remedies that you would take. Other than, of course, I'm sure GitLab would be happy to talk to you what they do, and they've got some good stuff to do it as well. So I think we have a long way to go, and it's not just the software that we are building; it's also the underlying tool chain that we build it with, the technology platforms that we're using for our pipelines flowing through DevOps processes into release and into production. Because that's where the supply chain attacks are also happening.
Let me ask you this. So one of the things that is in the study is that I think it was about maybe a third of organizations are actually doing something on DevSecOps, and about an equal number are actually training developers. Going to Black Hat this week. You know who's not going to Black Hat this week?
Developers.
Exactly.
Well, that they go to RSA. No, they don't. No, I'm kidding. Look, both RSA and Black Hat are security shows put on by the security industry for the security industry. And in spite of all the shift left and all of the things we've spoken about getting, breaking out of that silo, we've also discovered that developers don't want to be security administrators. They care about quality, right? They want to develop. No one says, I want to develop insecure code. But, they're not security pros, and you're still going to need security pros involved in this. They need to be brought into the fold of the broader IT team, not bring everyone into the security team per se, right? And I think that's an important distinction. Until all of our code is written by AI, and John, I know you have thoughts on that. This is what it is. There's going to be security issues. All that being said, though, I would venture to say that our software is of higher quality now than it's ever been, and we continually do improve it. But this is not an easy problem. And people who want simple solutions for hard problems, that's a big problem in this country beyond cybersecurity. And,
I want to.
It's hard.
I want to point out that there's some reasons why that study may have said that deployments are happening more frequently. One of the reasons is that more companies are moving to a decoupled architecture, which means smaller parts are moving on a more frequent basis. Secondly, when those smaller parts move on a more frequent basis, it's pulling in more potentially open source packages, which is where most of the vulnerabilities are being found. So now we have replicated those vulnerabilities across multiple containers. So as Alan's pointing out, this is a complex problem. And as we try to get on top of the vulnerabilities, we have more vulnerabilities coming. So it's like an avalanche. And, I'm going to say that at Black Hat here, you can talk to anybody out there about the market for zero-day vulnerabilities held us back for years. We had not only the government, but the big companies not announcing and not telling us about those vulnerabilities. So we're way behind. We are way, way behind. But the final point I want to make here is that I don't think that we can code scan our way out of this problem. I believe that the chaos, the theories around chaos engineering and the ability to respond to vulnerabilities, high-risk vulnerabilities as quickly as possible is where we should be thinking. And that is in that DevSecOps kind of responsibility layer. And yes, security needs to come over and start working with the DevOps teams to start solving these problems. But I just don't think we can stop them from coming. I think we can decrease our exposure to them, but we've got to get better at fixing things in production, kind of like CrowdStrike, right? Why did it take so long to fix that? Why was it a problem that had to reboot servers? That's a horrendous way to have to address a problem. But anyway, we've got to get better at response and figure out, what happened and the root cause analysis later. And I keep talking about this, and I hope that people start hearing me and saying that we've got to figure out ways to respond to these vulnerabilities as quick as possible, because I don't believe we're going to ever have a perfect software supply chain that has no vulnerabilities.
You said several really good things there, Tracy. One that I want to highlight is I believe on every CISO's scorecard should be their ability to deliver software to production quickly in smaller bites, smaller packages, because you may not need to deploy 10 times a day. Just in general IT, updating software, adding new features. Maybe your culture is not ready to accept software that quickly. That's something you're working towards. But the day you do have a problem, we need to deploy an open source, bug in our software that's got a vulnerability, whatever it might be, or something really serious happening that's causing corruption or security issues. Your ability to get something into production reliably and safely is extremely important, because you don't want to try to jam it down the pipeline and get it into production and just hope that fixes without any collateral damage to other issues. So my point is your ability to deliver software under an incident into production is as much of your security posture as any other measure.
It's interesting. You can apply this study to almost any industry. You think classic American capitalism, in our haste to produce too much too soon, we sometimes sacrifice quality and safety. And if you indulge me, Alan, remember Upton Sinclair goes all the way back to the jungle, trying to mass produce things as fast as possible. And sometimes that comes at the cost of the health of your workers, the consumers, and software is no different.
And the environment in general, right? Yeah.
Right. So it's repeating itself.
I think Tracy's right. We'll never solve this 100%, but I do wish maybe we would take 3 days out of every month and just focus on security, technical debt, and go back in and kind of clean up our mess a little bit and take some accountability and responsibility for this stuff, because it's not happening enough, in my opinion.
In a country where half of the people don't have a dime saved for their retirement, you think they're going to take 3 days a month out to fix software?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Wow. I can wish.
Happy birthday, Mike.
There you go.
All right. Hey, I think that's going to call it a wrap on today's Techstrong Gang. John, Tracy, Mitchell, and John. Thank you all for joining us, Mike. Thank you. You'll be holding down the fort here while we're out in Vegas next week or this week.
Party all week long.
Party. Well, it is his birthday party. Mm-hmm. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel. Enjoy your Monday. You've watched Techstrong Gang. We've got a full Techstrong TV lineup coming up right behind this, so don't go anywhere. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.